What if I told you that Mar-a-Lago was never meant to be a private home? That long before Donald Trump, its original owner had one wish for this grand estate to serve as a winter White House, a place of diplomacy and presidential power. And yet, for decades, that dream faded into obscurity. The U.S. government couldn't afford it to keep it, and the estate was abandoned, left to crumble, nearly demolished. No one wanted it, no one saw its value until one man did, Trump. With a strategic deal that no one saw coming, he brought Mar-a-Lago for a fraction of its worth, turned it into an exclusive club for elites, and later as President of the United States, he used it exactly as his original owner had envisioned, as a presidential retreat and a hub for global diplomacy. But here's the twist. It's just the beginning of this unbelievable story. This estate has seen almost a century of history, from being a Gilded Age palace to a burden no one could afford, to becoming the center of power, controversy, and political battles in modern America. Think about it. Why did Trump fight so hard to keep it? Why is Mar-a-Lago at the center of political and legal controversy today? How did a crumbling mansion turn into the most political charged estate in the world? From FBI raids and classified documents, scandals to world leaders secretly meeting behind its gilded doors, this estate is no longer just a symbol of wealth. It's a symbol of power, secrecy, and influence. Whether you love him or hate him, Trump did no one else could. He made Mar-a-Lago one of the most important political landmarks in America. And the way he did it, you won't believe the story. So how did this lavish mansion go from a socialized stream to a struggling property, and finally to the seats of political power? Let's start from the very beginning. The story of Mar-a-Lago begins in the 1920s, an era known as the Roaring Twenties, a time of lavish parties, booming industry, and unparalleled economic prosperity. It was a decade where the rich flaunted their wealth. Society was obsessed with grandeur, and the elites competed to build the most extravagant homes. Few embodies the spirits of the age as perfectly as Marjorie Merriweather posed. She wasn't just another wealthy socialite. Marjorie was one of the richest women in America, a self-made heiress who took control over family food empire at just 27 years old. What started as a small breakfast cereal company under her father's management eventually expanded into General Foods Corporation, making her one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country. But wealth was never enough for Marjorie. She had a vision, one that went beyond money and status. She wanted to leave behind something magnificent, something that would outlive her, a place that would forever be remembered. In 1924, she set her sights on Palm Beach, Florida, a growing retreat for America's elites. She purchased 17 acres of pristine oceanfront land, a piece of property so unique that it stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Worth Lagoon, giving it a natural dual waterfront view. Marjorie named it Mar-a-Lago, meaning from sea to lake in Spanish, a name that perfectly captured the breathtaking landscape surrounding the estates. But this wasn't going to be just another mansion. She wanted to build a palace, one that would rival the greatest estates of European royalty, a home that would stand the test of time. To bring her grand vision to life, she hired the best architect and designers money could buy. Marion Sims Wyatt, one of the Florida's most celebrated architects, was responsible for designing the estate's Mediterranean-inspired interior. He drew inspiration from Spanish, Venetian, and Moorish palaces, creating an architectural masterpiece that looked just like it has been lifted from the old world and placed in Palm Beach. Joseph Urban, a designer best known for his work in New York opera houses and Hollywood film sets, was chosen to craft the interiors. His job wasn't just to make the estate beautiful, he made it opulent beyond imagination. The details were extraordinary, ceilings gilded in real gold, walls covered in hand-painted frescoes, hand-carved wooden doors imported from Spain, tiles brought in from centuries-old European castles. Marjorie spared no expense. By the time the estate was finished in 1927, the final cost was a staggered $7 million, which adjusted for inflation would be around $130 million today. At the time, it was one of the most expensive homes ever built in America. But for Marjorie, Mar-a-Lago wasn't just about personal luxury. She had a much bigger dream for the estates, one that had nothing to do with her. She believed Mar-a-Lago should be a place of power, diplomacy, and leadership. Her vision? To turn it into a winter White House, where US presidents could host foreign dignitaries, global leaders, and key decision makers in a setting that would match the grandeur and influence of the United States. She saw it as a place where history would be made. She wasn't just dreaming, she made sure it would happen. Marjorie willed the entire property to the US government, ensuring that after her death, Mar-a-Lago would belong to the nation. But history had other plans. Her dreams didn't go as expected, and in the decades to follow, Mar-a-Lago would go from an unwanted burden to a struggling estate. And then, thanks to the one man, it would finally fulfill its destiny in a way no one could have imagined. But first, the US government had to decide what to do in the massive property. And as we'll see in the next chapter, they didn't want it. Stay with us because the twists in the history are just beginning. When Marjorie Merriweather Post passed away in 1973, she left behind one of the most magnificent estates in America, and true to her vision, she gifted Mar-a-Lago to the US government, believing it would serve as a winter White House, a place where presidents could host world leaders, plan policy, and conduct diplomacy in a setting as grand as the country itself. But the reality, no one knew what to do with it. While the idea of presidential retreat was romantic, the practical concerns were overwhelming. The estate was massive, 126 rooms, 17 acres of prime waterfront property, and a level of luxury that required constant upkeep. And upkeep wasn't cheap. The cost of maintenance was astronomical. Millions of dollars were needed each year just to keep the estate from falling apart. Security was a nightmare. The open waterfront made it difficult to protect from potential threats. It was too extravagant for most modern presidents, unlike Camp David, which was simple and functional. Mar-a-Lago was opulent, flashy, and required a full-time staff to operate. And then came the biggest problem of all. No one actually wanted to use it. Marjorie may have imagined a future where presidents walk the halls of Mar-a-Lago, where diplomats meet in its grand ballrooms, where history was made beneath its gilded ceilings. But reality was far less glamorous. Presidents after presidents ignored the estates. Richard Nixon, a Florida native, preferred his own Key Biscayne retreats. Gerald Ford never considered it. Jimmy Carter was focused on a more modest image and avoided anything that looked too luxurious. By the time Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, it became clear that no president would ever use Mar-a-Lago as a winter White House. The government faced a difficult decision. Keep it, continue paying a massive upkeep cost, and let it sit empty, or get rid of it. They chose the latter. And so, in 1981, the government returned Mar-a-Lago to the Post Foundation, effectively admitting that the estate was too expensive and impractical to serve its intended purpose. But the Post Foundation wasn't prepared for this burden either. They never expected the estate to be handed back to them, and suddenly they were responsible for millions of dollars in maintenance costs, and so they made a decision of their own: sell it. At first, they were optimistic. Mar-a-Lago was one of the most extravagant estates in America. Surely some billionaire, celebrity, or business tycoon would want to own it. They set the price at $20 million, a bargain for 17 acres of oceanfront property and a mansion that was essentially a castle. But there was one major problem. No one wanted it. For the wealthy elites, the estate was too big to be a personal residence and too expensive to maintain. For developers, it was too historic to be easily demolished or repurposed. And so, the once glorious Mar-a-Lago sat empty. Years passed. The estate began deteriorating. The once impeccable gardens became overgrown. The golden details inside the mansion became tarnished. There was even talk of demolishing it entirely, turning the land into luxury condos or resorts, a fate that would have erased Marjorie's vision forever, until one man saw potential where others saw a burden. A man who would change Mar-a-Lago stories forever, and his name? Donald Trump. By the early 1980s, Mar-a-Lago had become a forgotten relic. What was once a palace of luxury had now turned into a financial nightmare, too expensive to maintain, too big to sell, and too historic to demolish. The estate sat empty, crumbling, waiting for a new owner. And then, in 1982, a young and ambitious real estate mogul from New York took notice. That man? Donald Trump. At the time, Trump was already making a name for himself. He had turned his father's real estate business into a New York powerhouse, building skyscrapers and luxury properties. But his vision was bigger than just New York. Trump wanted a presence in Palm Beach, the playground of the rich and famous. And when he laid eyes on Mar-a-Lago, he saw something no one else did. To the world, it was a money pit. To Trump, it was a gold mine waiting to be uncovered. He knew that if he played his card right, he could turn this abandoned estate into a deal of a lifetime. But first, he had to get the price down. At the time, Mar-a-Lago was listed for $20 million. For most people, that was already a bargain for 17 acres of prime oceanfront property. But Trump, he never pays full price. Instead of rushing to buy it, he played a long strategic game. Trump knew if another billionaire bought Mar-a-Lago first, he lost the deal forever. So he came up with a brilliant strategy. He secretly purchased the beachfront land in front of Mar-a-Lago, a move that was completely legal but would make the estate less valuable to other potential buyers. This meant that if anyone else tried to buy Mar-a-Lago, they wouldn't have direct ocean access, a deal breaker for any ultra-wealthy buyer. Suddenly, the already unwanted estate became even harder to sell, and the post-fundants started panicking. They were desperate to sell, but now no one wanted to buy at full price. Once Trump saw the price wasn't moving, he made his move. He offered just $3 million. That was an insultingly low price, and the post-fundant immediately rejected it. But Trump wasn't in a rush. He knew the longer they waited, the more desperate they'd become. For 3 years, Mar-a-Lago sat unsold. The Post Foundation had no buyers. Meanwhile, the estate was falling further into disrepair, and the cost of maintenance was draining the foundation's funds. By 1985, they had no choice. Trump revised his offer. He would buy the estate for $5 million, plus an additional $2 million for the furniture inside. Total price, $7 million. It was the exact same amount Marjorie Merriweather Post had originally spent building Mar-a-Lago back in the 1920s. For the Post Foundation, this was humiliating, but they had no better option. And just like that, Donald Trump pulled off one of the greatest real estate deals of all time. He had purchased one of the most luxury mansions in America for pennies on the dollar. After sealing the deal, Trump immediately set out to restore Mar-a-Lago former glory. But he didn't just renovate it, he upgraded it. He restored the mansion's original gold leaf ceilings, frescoes, and historic detailings. He expanded the estate, adding a 20,000 square foot banquet hall that would soon host some of the world's most exclusive events. He turned into a luxury private residence, a symbol of power, success, and high society. But even for Trump, owning Mar-a-Lago wasn't cheap. The estates required millions of dollars per year in maintenance alone. So Trump, in classic Trump fashion, found a way to turn the estate into a money-making machine. In 1993, facing financial challenges, Trump made a bold decision. He converted Mar-a-Lago into an ultra-exclusive private club, one of the most prestigious in the world. The rules were simple. If you wanted access to Mar-a-Lago, you had to pay the membership fee, $200,000 upfront, $14,000 per year in annual dues. And it worked. Wealthy elites, CEOs, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries flocked to join. Mar-a-Lago was no longer just a mansion. It was now a symbol of power and status. It became a gathering place for America's most powerful figures. From struggling estates to an elite's retreats, Trump had done the impossible. For decades, Marjorie Merriweather Poe's dream of Mar-a-Lago as a winter White House had died, until Trump became president of the United States in 2016. Suddenly, the estate wasn't just his private club. It became the center of global politics. As president, Trump hosted foreign leaders, world diplomats, and presidential meetings at Mar-a-Lago. It became the Southern White House. Exactly as Marjorie had envisioned nearly a century earlier, Trump had not only revived Mar-a-Lago, he had fulfilled its original purpose. What started it as a decayed property turned into a powerhouse of diplomacy and politics, all because one man saw an opportunity when no one else did. Most people thought Mar-a-Lago was a lost cause, but Trump, he bought it at the fraction of its value. He transformed it into a profitable elite club. He turned it into a hub of political power. In the end, Mar-a-Lago wasn't just another property for Trump. It was his greatest real estate play of all time, and it was one that reshaped history, because what happened next would turn this once abandoned mansion into one of the most controversial political charged locations in America. Stay tuned, because in the next chapter, we uncover the political battles, scandals, and world-changing decisions made behind the golden doors of Mar-a-Lago. By the early 2000s, Mar-a-Lago was no longer just a luxury retreat. It had become one of the most prestigious clubs in America, with its gilded halls, sprawling beachfront views, and an elite guest list. It was the place where the world's wealthiest and most powerful people gathered. For years, it remained a billionaire's playground, hosting lavish parties, high-profile charity events, and exclusive galas. But everything changed in 2016. That year, Donald Trump was elected the 45th president of the United States. And overnight, Mar-a-Lago went from being an elite's private club to something much bigger, the unofficial Southern White House. Suddenly, this estate wasn't just a place for wealthy elites. It was a place for global diplomacy, a place where world leaders met, where policy decisions were made, and where some of the most controversial moments in the modern history unfolded. When Trump took office, most presidents had relied on Camp David as their private retreat, but Trump did things differently. He chose Mar-a-Lago, not just because it was his personal estate, but because it allowed him to conduct business in controlled environments that he owned. As president, Trump frequently traveled to Mar-a-Lago, spending weekends there and hosting high-profile meetings with world leaders. In 2017, he hosted Chinese President Xi Jinping, where they discussed global trade and North Korea. In the same year, he launched a missile strike on Syria while dining with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Foreign dignitaries, CEOs, and policymakers walked through its doors, making it a center of influence outside of Washington, D.C. It wasn't long before Mar-a-Lago was no longer just a presidential retreat. It was a political powerhouse, but with its power came controversy. While Trump saw Mar-a-Lago as an ideal place for diplomacy, critics saw it as a security nightmare. Unlike the White House or Camp David, Mar-a-Lago was a private club, meaning that hundreds of members, guests, and staff had access to the property at all times. These raised serious concerns about national security breaches, with world leaders meeting behind closed doors. Would sensitive information be leaked? Cybersecurity risks. Critics feared that Mar-a-Lago's private servers weren't as protected as government's facilities. Foreign spies. With such an open-door environment, intelligence experts worried that foreign operatives could infiltrate the club. These concerns weren't just theoretical. In 2019, a Chinese woman was arrested for trespassing at Mar-a-Lago, carrying multiple electronic devices including a USB drive with malware. Incidents incident sparked global headlines, fueling accusations that Mar-a-Lago was a national security risk. Critics demanded Trump stop using the estate for official businesses, but he refused. To him, Mar-a-Lago was more than just a club. It was his symbol of power. Even after leaving office in 2021, Trump continued to live at Mar-a-Lago, using it as his personal headquarters. But in August 2022, the estate made headlines for an entirely different reason. The FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, searching for classified documents that Trump had allegedly taken with him after leaving the White House. For the first time in American history, a former president's home was raided by federal agents. Their search uncovered top-secret government documents, sparking one of the most controversial political battles of modern times. Trump supporters claimed the raid was politically motivated, an attempt to prevent him from running for office again. His critics argued that keeping classified documents at Mar-a-Lago was reckless and illegal. Regardless of which side you were on, one thing was clear: Mar-a-Lago was no longer just Trump's estate. It had become ground zero for America's most heated political battles. But here's what's fascinating. Every time Mar-a-Lago was caught in controversy, Trump only made it more valuable. Rather than seeing the FBI raid as a setback, Trump turned it into a rallying cry for his supporters. The media attacked him. He claimed they were after him because he was a political threat. The government raided his home. He told his supporters they weren't just coming for him, they were coming for America. Democrats called for investigations. Trump used it as a proof that establishment was afraid of him. And guess what? It worked. The Mar-a-Lago controversy only solidified Trump's influence. Supporters flocked to the estate, treating it as a symbol of resistance against the political establishment. What was once a luxurious club for elites had become something much more, a fortress of Trump's political movements. Even now, as he runs for president again, Mar-a-Lago remains at the center of his campaign. He holds fundraisers, strategy meetings, and political events there. It has become a symbol of his legacy, both as a businessman and a political disruptor. Think about it. Mar-a-Lago started as a dream, a grand palace meant for U.S. presidents. Then it became a forgotten estate, abandoned and nearly demolished. Trump revived it, made it a place of power, and ultimately turned it into a Southern White House. And now, it's one of the most politically charged locations in America. From socialites' playground to presidential retreats to political battleground, Mar-a-Lago's journey is unlike any other. And it's not over yet, because as Trump's political career continues, so does the story of Mar-a-Lago. What happened next? Only time will tell. Mar-a-Lago is more than just a mansion. It's a place where a forgotten estate became one of the most valuable properties in America. A businessman turned president shaped U.S. diplomacy, political scandals, power struggles, and history all unfolded behind golden doors. Whether you love Trump or you hate him, one thing is undeniable. Mar-a-Lago is now part of American history, and its story is still being written. Because as long as Trump remains a force in politics, Mar-a-Lago will remain at the center of it all. If you had told anyone in 1980 that Mar-a-Lago would become one of the most politically significant locations in modern American history, they would have laughed. It was a burden, too big to maintain, too expensive to keep, and too historic to tear down. It sat abandoned and unwanted, nearly lost of time. But today, Mar-a-Lago is more than just a mansion. It has become a symbol of power where the ultra-rich celebrities and world leaders gather. A political fortress where Trump reshaped American politics and challenged the establishment, an historic landmark, a place that has witnessed everything from diplomacy to scandal. And now, as Trump runs the presidency again, Mar-a-Lago remains at the center of his next chapter. Another major question: what happens to Mar-a-Lago when Trump is no longer around? For now, the estate is Trump's main residence, and he has no plan to leave. But eventually, someone will have to take over. Will one of Trump's children inherit it? Will it remain a private club or be turned into something else? Could it eventually become a presidential library or museum dedicated to Trump's legacy? One possibility, it could become a permanent landmark tied to Trump's presidency, just like Mount Vernon was for George Washington and Monticello for Thomas Jefferson. With Trump's impact on American politics, media, and business, it wouldn't be surprising if Mar-a-Lago becomes a historic site for future generations' visits, because at this point, it's more than just a home, it's part of the history. When you step back and look at the full story, it's almost unbelievable how much Mar-a-Lago has transformed over the last century. Think about this journey. 1920s built by Marjorie Merriweather posed as a dream estate, intended to serve as a winter White House for U.S. presidents. 1970s, given to the U.S. government only to be rejected and returned because it was too expensive to maintain. 1980s, nearly demolished before Trump bought it for pennies on the dollar. 1990s to 2000 turned into one of the most elite private clubs in America, attracting billionaires, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. 2016 to 2020, where Trump hosted world leaders, made major political decisions, and reshaped diplomacy. 2022 to 2023 became the sites of an FBI raid, classified document scandals, and ongoing political battles. 2024 and beyond, still the base of Trump's political empire, influencing both national and international politics, a place that should have not survived. Mar-a-Lago has more twists and turns than most historical landmarks. It went from a forgotten mansion to one of the most politically charged locations in America. And through all the ups and downs, one thing remains true. It was meant to be a winter White House, and Trump made that a reality. But what happens after he leaves this position? Will Mar-a-Lago remain a Republican stronghold, a place where all will get involved into a bipartisan landmark, recognized for its place in American history? No matter what side of politics you're on, you have to admit, Trump turned Mar-a-Lago into one of the most important places in the country. But hey, don't you think Trump is an extremely smart businessman who knows how to turn the page? He saw potential where no one else did, turned a failing estate into an elite club, and later made it a political powerhouse. And now, as a president, he said he wants to make America great again. Do you think that's going to come true? Because looking at his history with Mar-a-Lago, he has a habit of making big things happen. What do you think the future holds for Mar-a-Lago? Will it remain the symbol of Trump's legacy, or will it take on an even bigger role in American history? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a fascinating story of Mar-a-Lago, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.